A millionaire who lost his child accidentally discovered a baby girl lying motionless in the middle of a rainy night. But when he got closer, his face paled when he saw the girl's belly. It's bulging. The hospital doors slid open with a hushed sigh, releasing Selina and William into the dimming afternoon light. The world outside felt almost too still, too indifferent to what had just transpired inside. Selina cradled her stomach instinctively, a gentle subconscious motion as she stepped onto the pavement. William stayed close, his hand hovering near her lower back, not quite touching, but always there, a silent assurance. She had always been independent, strong-willed even. But now, 3 months into her pregnancy, he caught fleeting glimpses of vulnerability in her that made him protective in ways he never had been before. "You okay?" he murmured as he unlocked the car. Selina nodded, though the movement was small. She was radiant even in exhaustion, her dark hair catching the last traces of daylight, skin pale but glowing. The doctor had reassured them that everything was normal. The baby was growing well, healthy heartbeat, no complications. And yet, beneath her composure, William sensed an unspoken fear. He opened the passenger door for her, watching as she eased herself in. She adjusted the hem of her sweater over her stomach, a tender motion that made something in William's chest constrict. Once he settled behind the wheel, the familiar hum of the city wrapped around them. The sky had turned an overcast grey, and a fine drizzle misted over the windshield. It wasn't quite rain yet, just a whisper of something heavier looming. Selina leaned her head back against the seat, exhaling slowly. "Almost 4 months now," she murmured, more to herself than to him. William glanced sideways at her, one hand steady on the wheel. "We'll be halfway there before you know it." She smiled faintly, pressing a palm against her belly. "It still doesn't feel real." William reached over, lacing his fingers briefly over hers, before returning his hand to the wheel. "It will. When we hear them cry for the first time, when they open their eyes." His voice trailed off, swallowed by the quiet patter of raindrops against glass. He could already see it in his mind. The nursery they had started designing, late-night feedings, tiny fingers curling around his. He had spent years building his empire, accumulating wealth, securing their future, but this was what he had been waiting for. Selina turned her face toward the window, watching the city blur past in streaks of neon and shifting headlights. "I hope they have your eyes," she said softly. William smiled. "I hope they have your stubbornness. The world needs more of it." The words barely left his lips before it happened. A shriek of metal, a sudden impact. The world flipped. William barely registered the moment between movement and stillness. 1 second he was gripping the wheel. The next he was weightless, his body flung against the confines of the car. A deafening crunch, the shatter of glass. Then, silence. His ears rang, his vision swam. The air smelled of burnt rubber and something metallic, sharp. He was on his side, wedged against the seatbelt, head pounding. He tried to move, but his limbs responded sluggishly, his mind still catching up to what had just occurred. Selina. Panic surged through him like a live wire. His fingers fumbled against the buckle, the latch sticking before it finally released. He turned, his vision tunneling toward the passenger seat, toward her. She was still. Too still. Selina's dark hair clung to her face, her body slumped against the crushed door. Blood smeared across her temple, but it wasn't that sent terror knifing through his chest. Her hands weren't on her stomach anymore. William reached for her, his fingers brushing her wrist, searching desperately for warmth, for movement. "Selina," his voice came out hoarse, strangled. "Selina, wake up." No response. Somewhere in the distance, sirens howled through the rain. The next minutes blurred. Paramedics, hands pulling him away. The flash of blue and red lights. A stretcher. voices shouting over the storm, urgent but far away. He fought against them, but his body failed him. Someone was pressing him down, telling him something about shock, concussion, let them work. Selina disappeared behind the ambulance doors, and before he could fight his way to her, the world faded to black. He woke to fluorescent lights. For a moment, he couldn't tell if it was still raining, or if the hum in his ears was just the aftermath of everything. The sterile scent of antiseptic burned his nose. Pain pulsed at the base of his skull, but he barely registered it because Selina wasn't there. William forced himself upright. A nurse noticed and moved toward him, but he ignored her, pushing himself off the hospital bed. His body protested, but it didn't matter. "Where's my wife?" His voice came out rough, edged with something dangerously close to desperation. The nurse hesitated, glancing toward the door. "Mr. Whitmore, we need you to—" "Where is she?" A doctor appeared, older, his expression carefully neutral in a way that made William's stomach plummet before the words were even spoken. "The surgery was successful. Selina is stable." William exhaled sharply. Relief, but only for a moment. The doctor's next words came slow, deliberate. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. We did everything we could, but—" William didn't need to hear the rest. The weight of it pressed down before the words even landed. The baby was gone. He swallowed, hard. His chest felt tight, like he couldn't breathe properly. But there was no space for his grief. Not yet. "Where is she?" His voice was barely a whisper now. "She's resting," the doctor said, softer this time. "But she hasn't spoken since we told her." William's hands curled into fists, not in anger, in helplessness. Selina had always been light, warmth, life. Now she was locked behind a door, sinking into something he wasn't sure he could reach. He pressed a hand to his face, inhaling sharply. For the first time in his life, William Whitmore didn't know how to fix something. The penthouse had never felt this quiet before. William stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, his hands buried deep in his pockets, staring out at the glowing skyline. New York pulsed beyond the glass, horns blaring, neon lights flickering, the city moving forward without hesitation. Yet inside these walls, time had stopped. Selina sat curled on the couch, her knees drawn close to her chest, wrapped in a grey knit blanket that swallowed her small frame. She hadn't spoken much in days. The cup of tea William had placed on the coffee table that morning had gone cold, untouched. She wasn't sleeping, at least not properly. She drifted in and out, never truly resting, her body present, but her mind somewhere far away. William exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. He didn't know how to fix this. It had been 9 days since they left the hospital, 9 days since they came home to nothing. Selina hadn't cried, not once, not at the hospital, not in the car, not when they crossed the threshold into their penthouse, where everything remained unchanged, where baby books still lay stacked on the coffee table, where unopened gifts from friends still sat in the corner, waiting to be unwrapped. And the nursery, the door remained shut. William had stopped himself at the threshold so many times he lost count. He stood there, his hand resting against the cold brass handle, unable to turn it. Inside, everything remained untouched. The crib they had assembled together, the tiny white onesies Selina had washed and folded weeks ago, the pale yellow walls she had chosen, because it felt like sunlight. It was all waiting for a baby who would never come. He had tried everything. Doctors, therapists, even her closest friends had come and gone, offering condolences, speaking in soft voices, handing her numbers on tiny white cards as if grief could be scheduled into appointments. But Selina wasn't there. She sat through conversations, nodded at the right times, but her gaze was always distant, unfocused. The only time she reacted was when someone said the word loss. Her hands would tighten slightly in her lap. Her shoulders would flinch, just a fraction, barely noticeable unless you were watching closely. William was always watching, and he saw it, saw how she withdrew further each day, how she barely ate, how she only moved when necessary, as if even existing had become too exhausting. And the worst part, she wouldn't let him in. Dinner had become a ritual of silence. William cooked. He placed the plate in front of her, watching, waiting. Selina picked at the food. Occasionally she took a bite, but mostly she moved things around with her fork, as if rearranging them might bring back her appetite. "Just a few bites," William said gently, careful not to push too hard. She didn't look at him. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain patient. He wanted to fix this. He was used to fixing things, to making problems disappear with the right phone call, the right action. But this was different. And so he sat there, across from her at the dining table, in a home that used to be filled with warmth and conversation, but now felt like a place neither of them belonged. Night was the hardest. William lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the space between them. Selina used to curl into him at night, her fingers grazing his chest, her breath warm against his skin. Now she lay stiff beside him, turned away, barely moving. Sometimes, in the quietest hours, he caught her awake, staring at the ceiling, her fingers resting lightly over her stomach, as if she were waiting to feel something that was no longer there. Once, he reached for her hand beneath the covers. Her fingers twitched, but remained limp. It wasn't enough. One afternoon, William came home earlier than usual. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the rain against the windows. He found her in the same place, on the couch, curled into herself. He sat beside her, close but not touching. "Selina." His voice was careful, soft. She didn't respond. William swallowed, looking down at his hands. "I miss you." The words felt too small for what he meant, but they were all he had. Selina blinked slowly, her gaze distant. For a second, just a second, he thought she might say something, but then her lips pressed together, and she turned her head away. William let out a shaky breath and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman he had loved for years, the one who used to fight him over the last slice of pizza, who used to laugh so hard she'd clutch her stomach, who used to make him dance with her in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. She was slipping away. And for the first time in his life, William Whitmore didn't know how to pull someone back. William drove through the wet streets, his hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. The rain drummed steadily against the windshield, blurring the neon glow of the city and casting everything in a distorted haze. His mind refused to settle. The guilt was suffocating. He should have been home with Selina. Today's meeting was heavy and ended at a time when people should be sleeping. He had left her alone for too long, long enough for the silence to become something more dangerous. He imagined her in the dimly lit penthouse, staring blankly at the wall, lost in the void where their child should have been. The thought unsettled him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. What if she... William clenched his jaw, pushing the thought away before it could take shape. The wipers smeared water across the windshield, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. His fingers tightened around the wheel. Then, movement. A small, hunched figure curled against the wrought iron gates of his estate, barely visible through the rain. At first, she was nothing more than a dark shape near the gates of his estate, a small figure curled in on itself against the pounding rain. His headlights swept over her, revealing thin limbs, soaked clothing, and motionless skin pressed against the cold pavement. William slammed the brakes. For a brief second, the world stilled. The only sounds were the rhythmic thrum of rain and his own heartbeat hammering against his ribs. Then he was moving. The wind howled as he stepped out of the car, rain drenching him instantly. He hurried toward the girl, his expensive shoes sinking into the puddles forming on the asphalt. She was young, 13 maybe. Her long, wet hair clung to her face, her clothes dark and heavy with rain. Her stomach was swollen. For one terrible second, He thought she was pregnant. The wind bit through his coat, rain soaking his collar as he crouched beside her. "Hey." His voice barely carried over the storm. No response. He hesitated only a moment before reaching out, pressing 2 fingers against her neck. A pulse, weak but steady. She was alive. Then, a sound. Faint, fragile, impossible. A muffled cry coming from her, number not her. A sharp breath caught in his throat. He looked closer, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Was she pregnant? No. Something was off. And then it hit him. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting something inside her coat. William reached out, prying the soaked fabric apart, and the sight beneath it made his stomach drop. 2 newborns, barely breathing. William didn't think, he acted. He shrugged off his drenched coat, carefully wrapping it around the 3 of them. The babies were unnaturally small, their fragile bodies trembling violently. The girl, Evelyn, he would later learn, made a weak, barely audible noise, her arms instinctively tightening around them as if sensing movement. "No, no, no. Stay with me," William muttered, shifting his grip. He scooped them up, holding them close against his chest. The babies barely stirred. His heart pounded in his ears. He needed to get them inside. Now the warmth of the penthouse hit like a wall. William carried the girl and the infants inside, his wet clothes leaving a trail along the pristine floor. The scent of rain clung to him, mixing with the artificial warmth of the heating system kicking in. "Selina!" His voice was sharp, urgent, breaking the oppressive quiet that had settled in their home. No response. William didn't have time to hesitate. He laid the girl on the couch, his hands moving swiftly, peeling back layers of drenched clothing. The babies, so tiny, so fragile, their lips were turning blue. Panic clawed at his chest. Were they breathing? Were they too cold? Then, a rustle. Selina barely stirred. She had heard William call her name, sharp, urgent, cutting through the fog, but it had barely registered. The words reached her ears, but they didn't pull her back. Not really. Not until the cry. It was faint, fragile, a sound that barely touched the air, but something inside her stopped. Selina turned her head, slow, mechanical, as if her body had moved before her mind could process why. Her gaze fell on William, soaked to the bone, his face drawn tight with urgency. The heavy scent of rain clung to him, pooling in dark patches on the hardwood. Then she saw them. A girl, young, unconscious, curled on the couch, but not alone. 2 impossibly small bundles wrapped in damp fabric rested against her chest, their tiny limbs twitching with the kind of desperation Selina recognized in an instant. Newborns. The room pressed in around her. Selina's lungs felt too tight. William was moving, rushed, frantic. He peeled away the layers of wet fabric from the infants, his hands unsteady. Their skin was cold. Too cold. Selina's stomach twisted. She knew that cold. One of the babies let out a weak, gasping cry. A small, shuddering thing that cracked through the suffocating haze Selina had been drowning in for weeks. Before she could stop herself, she moved. Her body, which had felt numb for so long, reacted before her mind could object. She crossed the room, dropping to her knees beside William. Her hands hesitated for only a second before she reached for one of the newborns. The moment her fingers touched the delicate skin, warmth surged through her, a stark contrast to the cold she had expected. The baby was so small. Selina's throat tightened. She cradled the tiny body instinctively, pulling it close. The warmth of her own skin against the infant's felt like something sacred. The baby made another sound, a faint whimper, and Selina's breath hitched. Her arms tightened. William saw it. He had been holding his breath, watching her, waiting. For days, weeks, Selina had been slipping away from him. He had tried to reach her, tried to pull her back from wherever she had gone, but nothing had worked. Until now. He watched as Selina held the baby, her arms wrapped around the fragile body as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Not just holding, protecting. He saw the slight parting of her lips, the way her fingers trembled as they traced over the infant's impossibly tiny hand. Then he saw something he hadn't seen in weeks. A tear. It slipped down her cheek in silence. No sobs, no dramatic collapse, just a single quiet tear that trailed down her skin, falling onto the blanket wrapped around the baby. She hadn't cried in weeks. Now she did. William swallowed hard, pushing down the ache in his throat. He turned back to the other child, moving quickly, efficiently. The babies needed warmth, food, care. He could think about what this meant later. Right now, they had work to do. Selina barely noticed as William moved beside her. She was lost in the quiet rise and fall of the baby's chest, the fragile rhythm of life beneath her fingers. She hadn't realized how much she had missed this feeling, the weight of something so small, so fragile, so utterly dependent on her. She had lost her child, but these babies were here now. A flicker of something long buried stirred within her, a forgotten instinct, raw and aching, but alive. She moved to the couch, adjusting the blanket more securely around the baby's body. Her fingers, once stiff and lifeless, now worked with careful precision. She pressed the tiny bundle against her chest, feeling the fragile heartbeat against her own. "Blankets," she murmured. Her voice was hoarse, foreign even to herself, but steady. William, surprised but quick to react, nodded and rushed toward the linen closet. Selina shifted slightly, positioning the newborn with practiced ease. The baby was so light, so impossibly small. She traced a fingertip over the delicate forehead, brushing away damp wisps of hair. The baby stirred, lips parting in a quiet sigh, and Selina found herself holding her breath. She hadn't realized how deeply she had buried this part of herself, this need to care, to protect. The emptiness that had consumed her since the hospital had been suffocating, yet now, with this child in her arms, there was something else, a different kind of pain, one that hurt but didn't cripple. William returned, arms full of blankets, towels, anything he could find. He handed one to Selina without a word, and she took it, wrapping the baby carefully. The warmth settled against her, soothing in ways she couldn't understand. William crouched beside her, tending to the second child. His movements were quick but controlled, his face unreadable. But Selina knew him. She saw the tightness in his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. He was holding something back, pushing down whatever storm raged inside him. He glanced at her, eyes searching. "Are they okay?" Selina nodded slowly, adjusting the blanket around the baby in her arms. "They will be." It was the closest she had come to hope in weeks. William exhaled, his shoulders relaxing just slightly. He looked down at the girl on the couch, Evelyn, they would later learn, still unconscious, but breathing steadily. "We need to figure out who they are," he murmured. Selina didn't respond. She knew that was important. Knew they would need to understand where these children had come from, how they had ended up here. But right now, she couldn't focus on that. Because for the first time since their world had shattered, she felt something other than grief. She looked down at the baby in her arms, small fingers twitching against the soft fabric. She felt, and that was enough. The first thing Evelyn felt was warmth. It was foreign, unfamiliar. For weeks, she had known nothing but cold, rain seeping into her bones, wind cutting through too thin fabric, the constant gnawing chill that settled in after too many nights without shelter. But now, there was warmth. Her body ached, heavy and sluggish, as if waking from a deep sleep. The distant sound of voices drifted toward her, low, murmured, unfamiliar. The scent of something clean, something soft, surrounded her. She forced her eyes open. The ceiling above her was high, pristine white with elegant molding. This wasn't the damp alley she had collapsed in. This wasn't the cold pavement outside the iron gates. Panic surged in her chest, but she was too weak to move. Her limbs felt distant, disconnected from her own body. Then, as her vision adjusted, she saw them. A man, a woman. The woman was holding one of the babies. Selina felt eyes on her. She glanced up, meeting the wary gaze of the girl on the couch. The child's expression was unreadable, somewhere between fear and relief, between exhaustion and defiance. Fierce, despite her weakness. Selina said nothing. She just adjusted the baby in her arms, making sure the blanket was snug, her fingers moving on instinct now. The child in her grasp was breathing evenly, cheeks regaining color. The weight of that small body had become something grounding, something that tethered her to the present. Evelyn swallowed, her throat dry, voice barely above a whisper. "Are they okay?" Selina hesitated, then nodded. "They will be." Evelyn's shoulders sagged slightly, some of the tension leaving her frame. She had been bracing for the worst. William, who had been standing near the fireplace, arms crossed, stepped closer. His gaze was sharp, but not unkind, studying her, waiting. "What's your name?" he asked. Evelyn hesitated. She had learned, long ago, that names had power. Giving someone your name meant trusting them, even just a little. But right now, she was too tired to lie. "Evelyn." Selina nodded once, as if tasting the name in her mind, committing it to memory. "And the babies?" Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound came. She turned her head slightly, looking at the twin bundled up in William's arms. The relief was overwhelming, too much. Her vision blurred for a moment, but she swallowed hard and forced herself to focus. "They're my siblings." Her voice was quiet, hoarse. "My mom. She—" The words stuck in her throat. William crouched in front of her, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice steady but not forceful. "Take your time." Evelyn blinked. She had never heard someone speak like that before, like they weren't demanding something from her. She exhaled shakily. "My mom. Sophia. She died when they were born. There was too much blood. I tried—" Her voice cracked. "I tried to help, but she was gone before I could even—" Selina inhaled sharply, barely noticeable, but there. Evelyn didn't dare look at her. She forced herself to keep going. "My father, he wasn't a good man. When my mum was alive, he ignored us. But after she died, he—" She swallowed, her fingers curled into the fabric of the couch. "He said it was my fault. Said I killed her." A muscle in William's jaw twitched. Selina had gone very, very still. Evelyn's fingers clenched tighter. At first, I thought maybe he just needed time, that he was grieving, but it got worse. The drinking, the yelling, the hitting. Selina's grip on the baby in her arms tightened just slightly. Evelyn licked her lips. Her throat was raw, her words uneven. "Then, one night he came home drunk. I thought he was going to hit me, but he didn't. He looked at the babies, and I knew." William's breath came out slow, controlled. "I didn't think. I just grabbed them and ran." Her voice wavered now. "I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay. We've been on the streets ever since." Silence settled over the room. The crackling fireplace filled the space where words couldn't. Selina exhaled shakily. She had spent days, weeks feeling numb, detached from everything around her. But now, with Evelyn's words lingering in the air, something sharp cut through the fog, something raw and aching. She had lost her child. Evelyn had lost her mother. The weight of grief, though different, felt the same. Selina looked down at the baby in her arms, then at the girl on the couch. Evelyn was watching her, cautious but hopeful, like she was waiting for Selina to tell her that she had done something wrong. Instead, Selina whispered, "You did the right thing." Evelyn blinked rapidly, like she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. William, standing now, crossed his arms. His expression was unreadable, but Selina knew him well enough to see what he wasn't saying. "What do we do now?" Selina didn't have an answer, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let these children go back to the life they had escaped from. Not now, not ever. The penthouse, once cold and silent, was now filled with movement. It was chaotic, unstructured, and unfamiliar. And for the first time in weeks, it felt alive. Selina stood in the kitchen, staring at the pot of boiling water, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. It had been so long since she had done something as simple as making tea. The small mundane act felt foreign, like she was stepping back into a life that had moved on without her. Behind her, the soft murmur of voices carried through the open space. Evelyn sat stiffly at the dining table, watching William with careful eyes. He had placed a bowl of soup in front of her, along with a plate of bread. The girl didn't move. "You need to eat," William said, settling into the chair across from her. His voice was firm, but not unkind. Evelyn glanced at the food, then back at him. Distrust flickered across her face. Selina turned off the stove and watched silently. She understood that look. It was the look of someone who had learned not to expect kindness without cost. "I'm not hungry," Evelyn muttered, though her fingers twitched slightly, as if betraying her. William leaned back, arms crossed. "You haven't eaten anything since last night, just a few bites." Evelyn hesitated. The warmth of the penthouse was deceptive. She had been offered food before, by strangers, by shelters, by people who claimed to care but eventually turned away. There was always an expiration date to kindness. She reached for the spoon, but didn't take a bite. "What happens after this?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "After we eat and sleep, do we leave?" Selina flinched. William was silent for a moment, his fingers tapping lightly against the table. "We haven't figured that out yet." Evelyn stared at him, her grip tightening around the spoon. "You're rich," she said bluntly. "You probably know people who can take us somewhere." Selina turned from the counter, stepping closer. "Is that what you want?" Evelyn's jaw tensed. "What I want doesn't matter." The words hit Selina harder than she expected. For weeks, she had drowned in her own grief, in the loss of her child. But now, looking at this girl, this child who had carried the weight of 2 lives on her back, Selina saw her own reflection. The same emptiness, the same resignation. She couldn't let her believe that. Selina pulled out the chair next to Evelyn and sat down. "It does matter," she said softly. "You matter." Evelyn stilled. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. After a long pause, she picked up the spoon and took a small bite of soup. William exhaled, tension bleeding from his shoulders. Selina felt it too. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Later that night, Selina found herself in the nursery. She hadn't set foot inside since everything. The air was still, untouched. The crib was there, the rocking chair. The shelves were lined with neatly folded blankets. A room that had been waiting for a child who would never come. She could have left. Turned around and closed the door. Instead, she moved toward the crib. One of the twins, swaddled in a thick blanket, was stirring softly. Selina leaned over, brushing a finger lightly across the baby's forehead. The tiny body relaxed beneath her touch. A lump formed in her throat. She had spent so long feeling empty. Now, with these children in her home, she was beginning to feel something else, something terrifying, something alive. She picked up the baby, settling the small weight against her chest. The heartbeat was soft and steady, a warmth she hadn't known she needed. She looked over her shoulder. William stood in the doorway, watching. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. For the first time in weeks, he saw her again. Hope flickered between them. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The night had been calm, almost peaceful. The twins had finally settled into a routine, sleeping in steady, rhythmic breaths, their tiny hands twitching occasionally in their dreams. Evelyn had fallen asleep on the couch after fighting exhaustion for too long. Even William had allowed himself a rare moment of ease, watching Selina cradle one of the babies in the nursery, humming softly. For the first time in weeks, things felt almost stable. Then came the cough. Selina barely noticed it at first. It was soft, barely a whisper of sound. But then it came again, wet, rattling, strained. She froze. Turning toward the crib, she watched as the second twin, so impossibly small, twitched, face scrunching up as another strangled breath escaped. The sound sent a ripple of panic through her, sharp and immediate. She moved before her mind could catch up. Selina leaned over the crib, hands trembling as she lifted the baby into her arms. Too light, too limp. And then, another cough. But this time there was no sound at all. Just an open mouth, a desperate little chest heaving, but no air. Selina's entire body went cold. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." She pressed her fingers against the baby's back, shifting slightly, adjusting the tiny body against her chest. "Breathe, sweetheart," she pleaded, voice breaking. "Just breathe." The baby's lips were turning blue. A rush of footsteps. William appeared in the doorway. "Selina!" She turned toward him, her face pale with terror. "Something's wrong." For a brief moment, William didn't move. Then, like a switch flipping, he was crossing the room, his phone already in hand. His hands never shook, his voice never wavered. But now, Selina could see the fear in his eyes. "Call an ambulance," she choked out. "Now!" Evelyn woke to chaos. She sat up too quickly, her heart pounding, her senses still dulled by sleep. The sound of voices, frantic, urgent. William's voice, Selina's sobbing. Something was wrong. She scrambled off the couch, nearly tripping over her own feet as she ran toward the nursery. Then she saw Selina on the floor. Selina, crying. Selina, rocking back and forth, clutching the baby too tightly, her whole body shaking. Evelyn's stomach twisted violently. Number. She rushed forward, barely aware of what she was doing. What happened? Her voice came out too fast, too sharp. William was on the phone, pacing, voice clipped. "Infant distress. Severe difficulty breathing. We need emergency medical assistance." Evelyn barely heard him, her eyes locked onto the baby. The tiny, helpless, struggling baby. The little chest barely moving. Selina's sobs cracked in her throat. "I can't do this again," she whispered. I can't lose." The rest of the words never came. Evelyn dropped to her knees. She grabbed Selina's arm, her grip tight. "Please," she begged, voice breaking. "Please don't let him die." Selina squeezed her eyes shut, her entire body trembling. William ran back toward them, dropping to the floor beside Selina. "The ambulance is on its way," he said, forcing control into his voice. "They're coming." Selina barely reacted. Evelyn let out a small, strangled noise, half a sob, half a plea. William reached forward, pressing a palm against Selina's cheek, forcing her to look at him. "Selina," he said firmly, "we are going to save him. Look at me." Her breath came in broken gasps. "You are not losing him," William said. "You hear me?" Selina nodded. "Just barely." Then the sirens split through the night. The ambulance took too long. Selina knew it hadn't. Knew, logically, that the response had been fast, but it felt like an eternity. She had fought them at first, when the paramedics pried the baby from her arms. She had clung to him, unable to let go, some primal fear screaming inside her that if she let him go, she would never get him back. William had been the one to pull her away, to hold her back as the medics worked. Selina's sobs had shaken through her entire body. And then, just like that, they were gone. The doors slammed shut. The ambulance disappeared into the night. Selina stood in the middle of the hallway, staring at the empty space where it had been. Her arms felt empty. Evelyn stood beside her, fists clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked small, smaller than Selina had ever seen her. For a long time, no one spoke. Then softly, so quietly, Selina almost didn't hear it, Evelyn whispered, "Please let him live." Selina swallowed hard. She could do nothing now, nothing but wait, nothing but pray. The hospital room was sterile, filled with the sharp scent of antiseptic and the quiet hum of machines. Selina sat stiffly in the chair beside the incubator, her hands gripping the edges of her coat so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The glass chamber held the tiny, struggling body of the baby, wires and tubes connected to fragile limbs. The steady beat of the heart monitor the only proof that life still clung to him. She barely breathed. A nurse moved around them, checking the monitors, adjusting IV drips. The baby's fever had spiked dangerously high. His little body twitched, his chest rising and falling in uneven gasps. Selina wanted to reach through the glass and pull him into her arms, to press his fragile body against hers and will him to live. But all she could do was watch. William stood at the door, leaning against the frame, watching his wife. She hadn't moved from that chair since they arrived, hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken. She just sat there, holding on. This was the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who fought. The woman who, even when shattered by grief, refused to break completely. He had seen her lost. Now, he was seeing her fight. Selina reached forward, pressing her fingertips lightly against the glass. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "You have to stay, little one. You have a home now." William swallowed hard, his chest tightening. Evelyn sat curled up in the waiting room outside, her knees pulled against her chest. She had refused to leave. Every time a doctor or nurse passed, she flinched. Every unfamiliar sound set her heart racing. She was waiting for someone to tell her the worst. That's how it always went. She had been a long time when she learned that waiting rooms were places where things fell apart. That sometimes, no matter how much you begged the universe, no matter how tightly you held on, people still left. Her mother had never come home. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her forehead against her knees. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Please let him live." She had barely slept since they rushed to the hospital. She hadn't eaten either. Her whole body felt drained, but the weight of fear pressed her down harder than exhaustion. Then, everything started spinning. The hallway blurred. The sounds around her became muffled. And then, darkness. William was the first to notice. He had stepped into the hallway for fresh air when he saw the small, crumpled figure on the floor. "Evelyn!" His voice startled Selina. She rushed out just in time to see William lifting the girl into his arms, her body limp. Selina's heart clenched. Not another one. When Evelyn woke, she was in a hospital bed. The bright lights made her head pound. She felt warm. Something soft draped over her. A blanket, thick and comforting. And beside her, Selina sat, watching. "You scared us," Selina murmured, brushing Evelyn's damp hair from her forehead. "You collapsed." Evelyn blinked, trying to sit up. A sharp dizziness pulled her back down. I'm fine," she rasped. Selina gave her a look. "You're not." A tray sat beside the bed. Soup, crackers, water. Selina reached for the spoon, scooped a bit of broth, and held it toward Evelyn. The girl hesitated. Selina sighed. "You haven't eaten in nearly a day." "I wasn't hungry." Selina set the spoon down, her eyes soft but firm. "Evelyn," she said quietly, "you need to take care of yourself too. He needs you. We need you." Something in Evelyn's chest tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. She swallowed, her throat dry, and nodded. Slowly she took the spoon from Selina's hand. She didn't eat much, but she ate enough. Selina stayed beside her the entire time. Hours passed. Selina never left the baby's side. A high fever. Then, a dangerous drop in oxygen levels. Alarms blared. Nurses rushed in. Selina froze. A doctor murmured instructions, adjusting the infant's oxygen supply, the numbers fluctuating wildly on the screen. Selina couldn't move. For one horrible, unbearable second, she saw the hospital room from before, the one where she had lost her own child, the one where the machines had screamed and she had been powerless. Her chest seized. She barely noticed William beside her until his hand closed over hers, his grip solid, grounding. She turned, her face streaked with silent tears. "He's going to make it," William said. Not a question. A statement. A promise. Selina didn't answer, because she couldn't lose another child. She couldn't. Then, just before dawn, something changed. The numbers on the monitor stabilized. The fever broke. The tiny, struggling body inside the incubator relaxed. The doctor exhaled slowly, glancing toward them. "He's strong," she said simply. "He fought through it." Selina's breath left her in a shaky sob. William let out a deep exhale, pressing his forehead against hers, their hands still locked together. They had almost lost him, but against all odds, the baby had stayed. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching, waiting. William turned toward her. He made it. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She nodded once, swallowing hard, then quickly wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. She wouldn't cry. Not now. But for the first time since her world had fallen apart, she allowed herself to believe in miracles. The days that followed felt surreal. The baby had survived. They had survived. But the fear still lingered, like the last remnants of a storm that had passed, but left destruction in its wake. Selina barely left the nursery now. She watched over the twins with an intensity that hadn't been there before. Not just caution, but something deeper. She fed them, bathed them, held them in the quiet hours of the night. It didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like love. William saw it in the way she smiled softly when one of them yawned, in the way she adjusted their blankets with careful, practiced hands. This wasn't temporary, and he knew then. They couldn't let these children go. Evelyn was struggling to believe it. She still slept lightly, waking up expecting to be told it was time to leave. She still hesitated before accepting food, before taking baths, before letting herself get comfortable. She knew better than to think anything lasted. She had spent too long being temporary. So, when William called her into the study one evening, she braced herself for what was coming. She knew what happened next. They had saved the babies. They had helped her. And now, it was time to find somewhere else for them. That's how these things worked. She sat stiffly in the chair across from William and Selina, gripping the edge of her sleeves, waiting for them to say it. Instead, Selina leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "We need to talk about something important." Evelyn nodded slowly. She didn't speak. William exhaled, resting his elbows on the desk. "We want you to stay." The words were so simple, so direct. Evelyn's breath hitched. She blinked, her fingers curling into fists. "What?" Selina reached across the table, placing her hand over Evelyn's. Her touch was warm. "This is your home now," she said softly. "If you want it to be." Evelyn stared at them, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She didn't know what to say, because no one had ever said that to her before. That night, Evelyn sat in bed, staring at the ceiling. They wanted her to stay, not for a night, not for a week, for good. The thought was too big to process all at once. She wasn't sure she knew how to belong to a place. But when she closed her eyes, she heard the babies breathing softly in the nursery down the hall. She heard Selina humming quietly as she rocked one of them to sleep. She heard William's footsteps outside the door, checking, making sure they were all safe. And for the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she already did. The papers arrived a week later, thick, official documents, crisp and permanent. Selina ran her fingers over the edges as she sat at the dining table, the weight of it pressing into her hands. It was real. This was happening. William sat across from her, pen in hand. He had always been a man of action, but today he took his time. He glanced at Selina before signing the first page, the smallest of smiles tugging at his lips. She smiled back. For the first time in a long time, there was no hesitation. Evelyn lingered near the doorway, watching. She didn't know why she felt so uneasy. They had told her, "This is your home now," but hearing it and believing it were two different things. Selina turned, noticing her. "Come here, sweetheart." The word still made Evelyn pause. It wasn't unfamiliar, but it had never belonged to her before. Slowly, she stepped forward, her eyes flicking toward the paperwork. William tapped a section with his pen. "This makes it official." Evelyn swallowed. "You're adopting me?" William nodded. "And your brothers." She hesitated. "They're not my brothers." Selina reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "They are now." Evelyn let the words settle. It had always been her and them. She had fought to keep them safe, had given up everything to make sure they lived. But now, she wouldn't have to fight alone. She glanced back at the papers, then at Selina and William. Their eyes held no pity, no expectation, just love. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Then for the first time, she believed it. The twins had names now. Selina had whispered them softly in the nursery that night, rolling them over her tongue as if making them real. "Jason," she murmured, brushing a hand over the first baby's head. His tiny fingers curled around hers, strong despite his size. "And Mason," she whispered to the second, who sighed in his sleep, his breathing steady and even. Jason and Mason. She had named her children, her children. The realization sent a rush of warmth through her, filling the hollow spaces inside her chest. William stood in the doorway, watching. "You did good," he murmured. Selina turned to face him, tears glistening in her eyes. "I feel like I got a second chance." William stepped forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You did." Evelyn adjusted slowly. At first, she still flinched when Selina called her daughter. She still waited for something to go wrong. But it didn't. William bought her a bookshelf for her room, filled it with novels he thought she might like. He never told her to call him Dad. He just let her exist, let her breathe. Selina tucked her in at night. Sometimes she would linger in the doorway, as if unsure whether to stay. One night, Evelyn whispered, "Can you sit with me?" Selina's breath caught, but she nodded. "Of course, sweetheart." And she stayed. The nursery was no longer a place of grief. It belonged to the twins now. Selina no longer hesitated before stepping inside. She no longer saw only what was lost. She saw Jason's tiny fist gripping the edge of his blanket. She saw Mason's soft, even breathing. She saw life. She saw love. One night, as William was rocking Mason to sleep, Evelyn sat beside him on the couch. She was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. "Can I hold him?" William's lips twitched into a small smile. He placed the baby in her arms, adjusting the blanket carefully. Evelyn stared down at him, watching the way his small fingers flexed. For so long, she had only known how to protect. But now, in this house, in this family, she was learning how to love. She looked up at William. "Does this mean you're my dad now?" William swallowed. His voice was steady, but his eyes were soft. "If you want me to be..." Evelyn hesitated. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely reached him, she said, "Okay." William smiled. Selina stood in the doorway, watching the two of them. Her heart was full. This wasn't just a house anymore. This was a home, and they were a family. The seasons changed. The once silent penthouse was now filled with laughter, soft cries, and the rhythmic tapping of little feet learning to walk. The nursery was no longer a place of grief, but a space of warmth and love. The walls that had once witnessed sorrow now echoed with giggles and sleepy murmurs in the early hours of the morning. Selina had found herself again. She was no longer just the woman who had lost a child. She was a mother, to two baby boys with bright, curious eyes, and to a girl who had spent her whole life believing she was unwanted. And now, she belonged. The first time Jason and Mason called Selina Mama, she cried. Not in sorrow, not in pain, but in pure, unfiltered joy. She had been feeding them, Jason babbling nonsense while Mason played with his fingers. Then out of nowhere, "Mama!" Selina froze, her heart stopping for a split second. Jason looked at her with sleepy eyes, unaware that his single word had just stitched her broken heart back together. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she gathered them both into her arms, pressing kisses onto their soft heads. William stood in the doorway, watching, his smile quiet but full. He had never doubted that she would heal, that they would heal. Evelyn still struggled with the word family. Even after all this time, even after being given everything she had once thought impossible, there were moments when doubt crept in. Would this last? Could she truly stay? One evening, William found her sitting by the window, knees drawn to her chest. She was watching Jason and Mason play on the floor, their tiny hands reaching for wooden blocks, their giggles filling the air. "You okay?" he asked, lowering himself onto the couch beside her. Evelyn nodded, but her fingers picked at the loose thread of her sweater. William studied her for a moment. Then quietly he asked, "Still don't believe it?" She let out a breath. "I want to." William leaned back, stretching his arms over the couch. "You know what I think?" Evelyn looked at him. "I think you're waiting for us to change our minds." She flinched. William sighed. "We're not going to, Evelyn." She swallowed, blinking rapidly. "But what if I mess up?" William chuckled. "Then you mess up, and we deal with it, like a family." Evelyn looked down at her hands, her chest tightening. William didn't push her. Instead, he reached over and ruffled her hair. The simple, playful gesture so casual, so normal, that it nearly broke her. It was the kind of thing fathers did. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. The final proof came on a warm spring afternoon. Selina sat on a picnic blanket in the park, the sun warm against her skin as she held Mason in her arms. Jason sat beside her, reaching for a stuffed rabbit, his little fingers grasping the soft fabric. A few feet away, Evelyn was helping Mason take his first steps. She held his tiny hands carefully, guiding him forward as he wobbled, his chubby legs working hard to keep balance. Mason stumbled, falling onto his bottom with a soft thud. Evelyn gasped, ready to panic. But then, Mason laughed, a full, delighted giggle. Evelyn blinked. Then slowly, she smiled. William sat beside Selina, watching the scene unfold. "Look at her," he murmured. Selina turned to him, her eyes warm. "She's happy." William nodded. "She's home." Evelyn turned toward them, as if hearing their words. Selina reached a hand toward her. "Come here, sweetheart." Evelyn hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then she ran into Selina's embrace. Selina held her close, pressing a kiss to her hair, her other arm still wrapped around Mason. And for the first time, Evelyn didn't wonder if this was temporary. She didn't question if she was allowed to stay. She just knew she was home, and family. Family wasn't just about blood, it was about love, and love was always a choice. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values yet entertaining. See you there.